Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You guys are sending us some really fascinating stuff on Hacker News these days.
Definitely keeps things interesting.
It really does, and today is no exception. We're talking about powerful new developer tools, some pretty mind-bending concepts, and, well, the kind of tech news that makes you stop and think.
The stuff that sparks those what-if conversations.
Exactly. And to help me unpack it all, as always, I've got my trusty guide right here, ready to dive in.
Let's do it. I'm always ready for a good deep dive into hacker news.
Awesome. So let's kick things off with some open source goodness because, you can't resist that. There's this new project management platform, Huly, that's creating quite a buzz online.
Yeah, Huly's definitely caught my eye. What's got developers so excited is the sheer speed and efficiency it promises.
I was going to say, what is it about Huly that has everyone talking?
It's more than just Huly itself. I think it speaks to this larger trend of developers craving leaner, more streamlined tools.
Less bloat, more focus.
Exactly. Nobody wants to wrestle with a clunky tool, especially when they're up against a deadline.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is your project management software.
And the needle is that one tiny feature you need to actually get your work done.
Oh, too real.
Mm.
And speaking of tools that help you get things done, did you see that Visual Studio Code extension for real-time HTML editing?
I did. It's a game changer for web devs. Talk about a productivity boost.
Right. It's like magic. You tweak the code and bam, the changes appear instantly in the preview.
No more switching back and forth between windows or refreshing a million times.
It's the little things.
They make all the difference. And you know what else caught my eye? Someone actually built a Python client for a $20 smart ring.
Wait, really? A $20 smart ring?
Yep, you heard that right. Just goes to show you the power of open source and accessible hardware.
You've got these low-cost components and a community of passionate developers sharing ideas.
And boom, suddenly you've got people hacking together incredible things.
The possibilities are pretty much endless.
They really are. And speaking of possibilities, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got faster diffusion models for AI.
Which, by the way, are those algorithms that are revolutionizing image generation.
Exactly. Think teaching a computer to paint like Van Gogh, but with code.
It's mind-blowing.
Ah.
And then we've got those discussions about the elegance of closure programming.
A language that's near and dear to my heart, I have to admit.
It's known for its power and its flexibility. And if that wasn't enough to make your head spin, there's even someone out there using matrices to transform colors.
Matrices, like those grids of numbers from math class.
Yep, apparently they have this hidden talent for manipulating images.
It's a great example of how these seemingly abstract mathematical concepts have very real-world applications.
You got it. So we've gone from the nuts and bolts of coding to the world of AI and image generation.
And now we're going to shift gears a bit and talk about sound and space.
Hold on to your hats, folks, because it's about to get wild.
Ah.
One of the articles we're looking at dives into why FM radio sounds better than AM, even with interference.
The age-old debate.
And another one explores those seriously strange properties of high-dimensional spaces.
Talk about a brain teaser.
Okay, so we're talking about FM radio sounding clearer than AM, even with interference, and the strange behaviors of things in more than 3 dimensions.
It's pretty wild stuff.
It really is. Both of these seemingly unrelated topics, they kind of highlight how easily our intuition can lead us astray when we're dealing with these complex systems.
They definitely challenge our everyday understanding.
For sure. Take FM radio, for example. You always hear that it's clearer, even with interference. But, have you ever stopped to think about why that is?
It's not something you really think about. You just take it for granted that it works.
Exactly. And most people probably don't even realize that there's a completely different way to transmit radio waves than how FM does it.
It all comes down to how the information is encoded. FM stands for frequency modulation.
So it's changing the frequency of the carrier wave to match that audio signal.
Right, whereas AM, which stands for amplitude modulation, changes the amplitude or the strength of the wave.
And this is the key part. Noise and interference, they mainly affect the amplitude of radio waves.
Which means FM's way of encoding information makes it inherently more resilient to that interference.
It's like the engineers found a way to outsmart physics.
In a way they did. And it's a great reminder that sometimes the most robust solutions come from really understanding the underlying principles at play.
Absolutely. Now, high-dimensional spaces, on the other hand, that's a bit more abstract.
It's definitely a concept that stretches our imagination.
Because essentially we're talking about increasing the number of dimensions, and as you do that, things start behaving in ways that just seem completely counterintuitive.
Our brains are wired for a three-dimensional world.
Right. Give me an example. How can something be so different in more than three dimensions? I can barely picture four.
Well, one classic example is how data points are distributed. In a high-dimensional space, most of those data points end up surprisingly far away from the center and closer to the edges. Yeah, it's called the curse of dimensionality, and it has huge implications for things like machine learning and data analysis.
Because if you're trying to analyze data or build algorithms that can make sense of that data, you have to account for those high-dimensional relationships.
Exactly. And it's not always easy because our intuition often fails us in these higher dimensions.
It's like our brains just weren't meant to think in 10 different directions at once.
Pretty much. But the article does a good job of explaining some of these concepts in a way that makes sense.
I was going to say they even provide some helpful visualizations to try to wrap our heads around it.
Visualizations definitely help.
They do. So we've got these mind-bending concepts about sound and space, but, you know, we can't forget about the human element.
It's always fascinating to see how technology intersects with our lives.
And today we've got a really interesting mix. We've got articles about TikTok facing scrutiny, Uber's challenges, managing massive amounts of data with MySQL, and even a camera capturing daily life in New York City. What ties all of these together?
Well, I think it's a crucial reminder that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's woven into the fabric of human lives and experiences.
It's true. And sometimes that fabric gets a little messy.
It definitely can. And these articles highlight some of those messy intersections.
Like with TikTok, for example. It's not just an app for sharing funny videos anymore. It's become this massive cultural force.
And with that kind of influence comes some serious ethical questions.
Exactly. Questions about data privacy, about how the platform promotes content, and whether it's doing enough to protect younger users.
It's a classic example of the challenges we face in the digital age, trying to balance innovation with responsibility.
Because technology is evolving so rapidly, and we're still figuring out how to navigate all of these new possibilities while making sure we're not causing harm along the way.
And those concerns extend beyond just social media. That article about Uber's MySQL challenges that really highlights the sheer scale of data being generated these days.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah.
All those rides, all those users, that's a massive amount of data to manage.
And Uber relies on MySQL to handle it all.
MySQL. That's a relational database management system.
Yes, it's one of the most popular open source databases out there.
So what kind of challenges do you run into when you're dealing with that much data?
Well, performance is a big one. You need to make sure that queries are processed quickly and efficiently so users aren't left waiting around for their ride information.
Especially when you've got people hailing rides in real time.
Exactly. And then there's scalability.
Hmm.
As your user base grows, you need to make sure your database can handle that increased load.
It's like building a house. You don't want the foundation to crumble when you decide to add a second story.
Perfect analogy. And the article talks about some of the techniques Uber uses to optimize their MySQL setup, things like database sharding and query optimization.
So they're basically breaking down the database into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Exactly. It's like splitting up that giant library catalog into smaller volumes.
Makes it a lot easier to find what you're looking for.
Exactly. And then query optimization, that's all about making sure those searches are as efficient as possible.
So they're not sifting through millions of records every time someone orders a ride.
Precisely. It's a fascinating look at the behind-the-scenes work that goes into building and maintaining these large-scale systems.
It really is. And it's something most of us take for granted. We just expect things to work seamlessly.
It's a testament to the skill and ingenuity of the engineers who build and maintain these systems.
Absolutely. So we've got ethical considerations with social media, the mind-boggling scale of data management. What about that camera in New York City? That seems like a completely different angle on the human element.
It does, doesn't it? But it speaks to something really profound, our innate desire to document and understand the human experience.
It's like this digital time capsule preserving moments in time that would otherwise be lost.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the historical record we're creating with all of this technology. Imagine someone a century from now looking back at our photos, videos, online conversations.
It's like we're leaving digital breadcrumbs for future historians.
Exactly. And it raises some interesting questions. What will they make of our lives? What will they find fascinating, confusing, shocking?
It's fascinating to think about. And it speaks to the power of technology to not only shape our present, but also to influence how we're perceived in the future.
It's a reminder that our actions today have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate understanding.
Well said. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of coding tools to the philosophical implications of technology in the blink of an eye.
It's been quite a journey. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that the future of technology isn't predetermined.
It's being shaped right now by the choices we make, the innovations we pursue, and the conversations we have.
Exactly. By staying curious, questioning assumptions, and engaging in thoughtful dialogue, we can help steer that future in a direction that benefits everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Well, folks, that's a wrap on another deep dive into the fascinating world of hacker news. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
And remember, the future is ours to create.